Apparently, the haters' musical intros have proven to be quite successful. So that's right, we're gonna be doing musical requests, cucks. Think of a song and the hater will try to weave it into a video. Let's do it for the people and let's do it for fun. Today's video is going to be about the relatively low impact that wrestlers have nowadays on the product, right? This all started, in my opinion, right after the Attitude Era. The amount of impact that any given wrestler would have went from significant to completely insignificant. I will use various examples in this, starting with The Undertaker player as the baseline. Around the year 2000, 2001, I don't remember exactly, The Undertaker started getting hyped up by JR and the company itself as having experienced a decade of destruction. You couldn't fucking turn on Monday Night Raw or SmackDown without seeing The Undertaker and hearing JR talk about, the decade of destruction, king, right? That would happen. Go Sooners! That would happen all the time. He would always talk about how The Undertaker has basically been in this company for 10 years and how he has been completely dominant for all 10 of these years. Now, I understand that this is The Undertaker we're talking about, and obviously it would be ridiculous, for example, to do what I'm going to do, and that is to compare someone like Dolph Ziggler to The Undertaker. Obviously, this is not lost on the hater. The hater understands this. However, it doesn't matter because we're going to compare him to many, many other people as well, right? And the idea is, by comparing him to other people, we're going to prove once and for all that basically nobody in this company has any kind of ability to do anything that is long-standing or relevant in really any other way. So, right after the Attitude Era, we started getting the Ruthless Aggression Era, which people look back upon favorably. I do too, right? But it was a transitional period from awesome to not as awesome, right? We were used to seeing wrestlers all the time, and therefore their dominance was much more attuned, right? So for example, Val Venus, use him as an example. There was like 1 year when Val Venus had like 90 documented matches. Not sure some of them were 2-minute matches, but it doesn't matter, right? You saw this guy like 90 times in 1 year. Cocky Rhodes, you see about 9 times in a year, right? Like maybe now 15 times if you count some of the house shows that I'm sure he does. But the idea is there's less opportunity to make impact. And this started during the Ruthless Aggression Era when we had the brand split. The brand split just basically cut everyone's schedules in half, right? So you wouldn't see even The Undertaker as often. But nevertheless, The Undertaker and other people like him either were already established or they were on their way to being established. I'm talking about your Brock Lesnar's, I'm talking about your Ortons, your Cena's, your Batistas, and to a lesser degree, your Triple H's, who were already established, but, further established themselves, right? So Triple H is a great example. He's someone that spent a long time in the WWE, and he had a very meaningful career, right? Then you look at some of the midcarders, right? Now, I understand the decade of destruction cannot be explained to midcarders, but let's look at one of everyone's favorite midcarders, who, as time goes on, I start believing is more and more overrated. Shelton Benjamin, okay? Shelton Benjamin, great athlete. Both him and Charlie Haas, great athletes. But the problem is, with Shelton Benjamin, and to a lesser degree Charlie Haas, is that he was in WWE for more than 10 years, and it never felt like it, right? MVP is another one. Carlito is another one, right? And it's not just because they're mid-carders. It's just because they're boring, and quite frankly, they didn't do anything interesting, right? Because you also had Matt Hardy was in WWE for more than 10 years, and so was Jeff Hardy, and they were interesting, right? They did something. John Morrison is another one, right? Who was in WWE for like 10 years, but it felt like he was. Sheamus has had a successful WWE career. But then you get to people like Shelton Benjamin. You get to people like Chavo Guerrero. You get to people like my personal favorite of these, right? Meaning like favorite in the sense that like he sucks the most. Dolph Ziggler, right? Dolph Ziggler was in this company for a fucking eternity. But it never felt like it. He never felt like a veteran. There was a point when Shelton Benjamin and Dolph Ziggler were in the company for like 8-9 years, and it didn't feel like they were anywhere close to having made an impact. The way that Undertaker's decade of destruction was presented, right, was almost as if The Undertaker had been there for such a long time that it was now noteworthy. Meaning that if The Undertaker quit the year after, his career would already be a legendary one, and that was the case. But at the time, Taker was like 31 or 32. You know, he wasn't even in his prime yet, and he was already a legend. This is something that doesn't happen anymore. Even someone like Bronson Reed, who is pegged to be like this future world breaker, world eater type, even he is not going to be that guy because the snail's pace that people move in WWE. Now let's look at some more modern examples. You've got, let's use my personal favorite example of worst wrestler to ever have the career that he's had. Sami Zayn, right? Sami Zayn fucking sucks. And Sami Zayn, you would think he's like 33 or something, but he's 41. He's been in this company for 13 years and has basically nothing to show for it. He's been in a bunch of mediocre and suboptimal storylines, and he's had some mediocre and suboptimal matches, in my personal opinion. Now you've got people like Gargano and Ciampa who are on their way to hitting a 10-year mark in WWE. I don't think they'll make it for reasons that I shouldn't have to explain, because let's be real. Do you really think that Gargano and Ciampa are going to be there in 2 years? I don't think so. I think they've been there for 6 or 7 years for now, right? At least as contracted WWE employees. But the fact is that these guys, if they weren't there for this entire 7 years, nobody would notice. Nakamura and people like AJ Styles, who arguably came in late. They came in late to WWE, right? They probably weren't going to have 10 WWE years, although they're both approaching it somehow. Against all odds, AJ Styles is fucking still there. You know what I mean? AJ Styles is still that dude. It's unbelievable. He's almost 50, but he's still there, and he's been in the company. It has to be for 10 years at this point, you know what I mean? I don't know exactly. I don't know the exact timeline of AJ Styles, but I believe he left TNA in 2013, 2014 maybe, and then he came back he was in Japan for a year and a half, wasting his time, honestly. But maybe you can argue that got him into WWE, so that's kind of nice. But realistically, I think his career really started having some traction in WWE. People started knowing who he was, which was awesome. And I think that was at this point, almost 10 years ago. Yeah, it says here, 2016 he started, right? So AJ Styles is a great example of someone who has been there for 10 years and who eventually will be there for 10 years because I think he's going to retire next year, he said. So he's almost at his 10-year mark, and he feels like he's been there for 10 years. He has had a valuable career. If you compare him to someone like Sami Zayn, who's been there longer, if you compare him to someone like Kevin Owens, it obviously feels like AJ Styles has had the better of these careers, right? So it's not like nobody does this. It's just that there's so many people that are there for 10 years and it doesn't feel like it. Back in the day, when The Undertaker player hit the decade of destruction, it was presented as something awesome and unique. It was presented as something that shouldn't happen. A wrestler shouldn't be active and dominant for 10 years. Because the presumption always was that newer, younger guys are going to pop up and they're going to take over. That someone is going to take over Undertaker's spot. But they couldn't. Even though they designed Kane to do that, they still couldn't take over the Undertaker's spot. That's the idea here, right? Nobody expected all of these other wrestlers like Orton and Cena to go for as long as they did because they were the first people in their generation to actually last a long time. Back in the day, right, you had someone like Val Venis. He didn't have a 10-year WWE career. And even if he did, right, for maybe 5 years, he was quasi-relevant to relevant. And for the other 5 years before he got fired, he was a complete nobody. You could say the same thing, for example, about Hardcore Holly, right? He was there for a fucking eternity, but it's he was relevant for 3 years, and then for 8 years, he was a complete nobody. He was just there on Heat, wrestling every 3 weeks or something, right? But all of a sudden, that is now the norm, right? You could say, for example, that Nakamura has had a good career because he's been a multiple-time mid-card jobber champion, and he won the Royal Rumble. But in my personal opinion, he's underachieved. He's been there for about 10 years as well. He came around the time when AJ Styles came. And he went to NXT because he sucks. And he has done nothing. I mean, he's made money. Good for him. I'm happy about that part. right? Because it goes to show that, like, he didn't completely waste his life, at least, right? But he didn't change the game in any meaningful way. Even though he's there for 10 years. He basically had zero impact. He has had a Shelton Benjamin level career. There's other people that I can think of. Bobby Roode, he didn't have 10 years, but he had a good amount of time. Ethan Page is on his way there. Gargano and Ciampa, Nathan Frazier, Dolph Ziggler, Tyler Breeze, Karrion Kross. These are people that have had relatively long stints in the company, but have had absolutely zero success. Zero, motherfuckers. Karrion Kross, if he never worked in WWE, absolutely nothing would change. Like, maybe WWE would have more money because instead of putting him on TV, they'd put literally anybody else, and that person would probably draw more money, right? He has had no impact. And back in the day, this also happened, of course, right? There were people that didn't have an impact, right? Not everyone is cut out to be an entertainer, and obviously, even within the world of entertainers, not everyone is cut out to be a WWE superstar. But the people that weren't cut out for that got released. I can give you so many examples of wrestlers that were way more over, that were way more interesting, and that were, quite frankly, overall better than the likes of the people that we have to tolerate today. Here's an example. Let's take Taz, right? Taz was massively over. Taz was, I'm not going to say Taz is like The Rock, but he was interesting. Taz was fun to watch. Taz was a good promo. Taz was a good wrestler overall. And Taz didn't make it. So, the company, Taz is also good at other things, so they made him an announcer. But before he became an announcer, Taz was going to be on his way out, right? The writing was on the wall. After the invasion angle, Taz was just kind of there, you know? He was like on the same level as like Rob Conway. Nobody gave a fuck. But, like Rob Conway, he would have gotten released. Nowadays, we have to tolerate the likes of Ilya Dragunov and Carmelo Hayes for like 10 years, and they got nothing to show for it. So, it seems to me that something is broken in the system. It seems to me that it would be more intelligent to take someone like Carmelo Hayes, to take someone like Ilya Dragunov, and just fire them on the spot. They're not going to have meaningful careers. That ship has sailed. But the reluctance that WWE has in firing people is a problem. Like Karrion Kross, I keep coming back to him historically, but I can't help it. He's the best example of this that I can think of. Karrion Kross was someone that anyone who's ever watched wrestling for more than 3 months should have known this guy was never going to make it. The hater knew he was never going to make it, and I said this. I refuse to believe that I have some superior knowledge of wrestling when compared to the likes of Bruce Pritchard, Triple H, and maybe even Lee Fitting, for all I know, right? These people should know more than me, and obviously, likely, do know more than me. Vince McMahon obviously knows more than me, right? But for some reason, he didn't want to fire these jobbers. He was just like, just stay there and drain the money of this company. Now, some of you may be thinking, well, if they have a lot of money, they can afford to take a lot of gambles. And I agree, right? I personally believe that's how you find superstars. But if you have, let's say, $1 million, right, using some back of the envelope calculations, and you have 10 wrestlers that you're paying $100K a year to, right? You can experiment with 10 wrestlers, right? Or, better yet, you pay them $100K a year, but you only pay them for 6 months, then you fire their ass, right? The permutations and the calculations don't have to be exact. What I'm saying is this. You sign Karrion Kross to a contract, and let's say you pay him $200,000 a year. I highly doubt it, but let's say he's making $200K a year. If he's making $200K a year, right? Well, 1 year, 2 years, you let it ride. You hope that he connects with the audience. You hope that something comes of this. But after that, you realize that nothing's going to come of this. So you have to cut your losses. This is called a sunk cost in economics, and you have to move on. You can't continue to harp on the same thing and hope for something to happen. It's not going to work. That is the problem. Now, some affirmative action hires, right, are good here and there. You know, you need a few Australians, so when you go to Australia, you can promote them. That's why Buddy Murphy was around for longer than he should have been, right? You need Sami Zayn so that when Saudi Arabia buys WrestleMania, you can go and crown him as the world champion at WrestleMania so all the people can go home happy. I get that. I mean, obviously I would say you could probably find a better Arab, right? And you could find like, not to judge Sami Zayn for being white, right? Because the hater's white, but he's like a white Arab. And I know that Arabs can be black, they can be white, they can be anything, right? But a more Arabic Arab, right? Not a Canadian with red hair. Someone that is more Arabic in nature, right? Like even Muhammad Hassan, who wasn't an Arab at all, but at least was presented as one. That would make a much better champion. Imagine if Muhammad Hassan was around now and he became world champion on Saudi Arabia. Like everyone would get behind that. Because he was not boring like Sami Zayn. But anyways, I digress. The point is, it's okay to keep a few jobbers around, right? A few affirmative action jobbers. If you're going to go to Japan, it would behoove you to have some Japanese wrestlers. If you want to expand it to Mexico, it would behoove you to have some Mexican wrestlers. If you want to go to the UK one day for WrestleMania, it would behoove you to keep like a Ridge Holland or a Sheamus or a Drew McIntyre. That's fine. No one's saying like everyone has to like be great. But most people have to be great. Most people have to be net positives. And if someone is a net positive or a net negative almost immediately. And again, there's many ways to be a net positive. Shelton Benjamin is a great example. While he had nothing to show for his career, Shelton Benjamin was always there reliably to put on a match against someone that was getting a push. Maybe like a Christian Cage. Maybe Shelton Benjamin would get his ass whooped by Brock Lesnar. Maybe Shelton Benjamin would get his ass whooped by Carlito, right? He was there to put people over. That was his role. And he was good at that. Because if you're going to have someone do that, you might as well have Shelton Benjamin instead of having James Ellsworth, right? You know what I mean? Like, there's still a value. But I'm talking more because nobody really expected Shelton Benjamin to be anything. Like, let's be honest, right? When Kurt Angle introduced, like, the world's greatest tag team, which were first Team Angle, nobody thought that Benjamin and Haas would have ever become anything, right? Because they're, like, smaller guys compared to the people they were around. Because they were surrounded by, like, Angle, who's an Olympic gold medalist and charismatic, Lesnar, who's like twice their size, and then they're surrounded by like even bigger motherfucks, like Matt Morgan and shit like that. Like it's hard to take Shelton Benjamin seriously when he's next to Matt Morgan and Big Show, right? And then eventually next to like Lashley and other people that they keep getting bigger guys and Test and like fucking even Rhino and people like that. It's hard to keep taking them seriously. Now, if Shelton Benjamin was signed today, nobody would be giving a flying fuck about Carmelo Hayes, Trick Williams, Nathan Frazier, and Tony D'Angelo. Nobody would give a shit about any of those guys. They'd be like, this Shelton Benjamin guy, this guy's the future, right? But that's how it worked. He was signed at a different time. And in that different time, he was irrelevant. He didn't make an impact. And the standards keep going down and down. And now it's to the point where people are hopefully wishing for impacts that are just not going to happen, right? Like the idea that Ilya Dragunov, because people are talking about this now, they're like, oh, he should be champion. The idea that Ilya Dragunov is going to be world champion is absurd. Could it happen? Anything's possible. But should it happen? Absolutely not. Ilya Dragunov should be absolutely nowhere near the world title scene. But I mean, obviously, if Sami Zayn becomes champion, then, everyone can become champion. Literally everyone. Like Kit Wilson can become champion if Sami Zayn becomes champion, right? But the idea is people are always surprised that the people that they like aren't making it. And to me, it's very obvious. It's like, there's never been a time in wrestling history where everyone made it, right? It's just that you didn't develop attachments to these people. Because if Carmelo Hayes and Trick Williams were around in 1999, they would have been released, right? Not a slight against them, but they've been in the company for like 4 years, right? Yes, they were mostly in NXT, and Trick is still in NXT, right? But they've been there for 4 years. Like Crash Holly's entire career, which in my opinion is Hall of Fame worthy because he stood out so much and he was so entertaining. Like his career was like 4 years, right? He came in, he got over, he became massive, right? For like a mid-card guy. He had incredible success for someone his size in the Attitude Era. And then he got released. Then he died, rest in peace. You know what I mean? But nowadays, we're in the Triple H era. And in the Triple H era, you need 9 years to get someone over. Like Cody Rhodes failed. He had like a worse run, obviously, than Shelton Benjamin in his first run. The timing was just right. Like that's all it is. It's not like Shelton is worse than Cody now. I would say Shelton is better than Cody now. But it's just timing. Like Cody Rhodes is younger. So they're like, oh, we can keep him around for 5 more years, right? Shelton, they've been wrong about this guy the whole time. They could have kept him around. Like if they knew that Shelton would be consistently wrestling until 50, like they'd keep him around. But let's be real. Shelton, like MVP, Bobby Lashley, these guys, and other people like Test, who passed away, but Test was headed in the same direction. Like Charlie Haas, fucking, Rene Dupree, right? Anybody that had any kind of prospect that is still wrestling today, like, let's be real, they wouldn't be wrestling today. If MVP had been like a 10-time WWE champion, he would not be wrestling right now. He would either be in WWE wrestling like once every like 3 months like Randy Orton, or at the very, if he was like a 10-time champion, he would be gone. He'd probably be retired and much richer than he is now. Same thing with Lashley, same thing with Shelton Benjamin. A lot of these guys can wrestle, right? Like John Cena can if he wants to. He just doesn't need to, motherfucks. Brock Lesnar can easily go and wrestle every week, but he doesn't need to. He's made his money, he's left his legacy, so he has more bargaining power. The other people that didn't make it because they didn't make it, and now they're still around because they didn't make it. But the idea stands. The point is, if in 10 years you do not have an Undertaker-level resume, right, you shouldn't have been there for 10 years. You see what I'm saying? Very simple. I know it's harsh, but if you're Steve Blackman, you have your run, you're forgettable, and then you get released. So then the next Steve Blackman, Rob Conway, can come in. He didn't work out either, you get released. But during the Ruthless Aggression era, we fell into this trap where it's like there's people that clearly had no future. Like, I'll give you a great example. There was a feud. This was a massive feud back in the day. MVP became the U.S. champion, and everyone thought that MVP was going to be this big deal. I could tell a mile away that this guy was never going to make it. First of all, he's shaped weird. I don't know how to explain it, but he wears like the Power Rangers, jumpsuit, and he's just awkward looking. Like he's kind of fat, but he kind of isn't. It's weird, right? He doesn't have the physical charisma. MVP can talk on the mic. MVP is decent, but he is corny, or he was corny. He would come out with like a Band-Aid on his nose, and like he would do the ball in, right? He would look like a retard, right? He would do the little flailing arms thing. He had a shit finisher, right? Like there was a lot of things about him that in my opinion screamed, this guy's never gonna make it. Despite this, he was pushed to the moon. He became U.S. champ, and with Matt Hardy, he won the tag team titles. And then the feud became him versus Matt Hardy. Now, Matt Hardy, back then, people were saying Matt Hardy's done, right? He was like in his early 30s, right? And Matt Striker is burying him on commentary because Matt Hardy got fat. And he's like, oh, Matt Hardy's been around for a long time. His body's broken. He doesn't have time to go to the gym. Like, literally, Matt Striker said this. But anyone that knew anything knew that if you look at Matt Hardy, an MVP, and you ask yourself, in 20 years, which one of these guys is going to be more legendary? The answer to everyone that knows anything would always be Matt Hardy, right? You just knew, right? Chavo Guerrero, they tried to push him. They tried to make him ECW champion. But you knew that when it's all said and done, you know for a fact that Chavo Guerrero is not going to be remembered more fondly than, let's say, I don't know, Big Show, right? Or Jeff Hardy, or anybody that matters, or Sheamus, who was coming up like at that time. You just knew this by looking at them and by seeing what they do. But for some reason, during the Ruthless Aggression era, and this problem still haunts us today, people didn't do this. They didn't perform this analysis, right? That's how it works. The idea was very simple. You come in, there's no reason why Shelton Benjamin's career lasted longer than Charlie Haas's. It's as simple as that, right? He's not better than Charlie Haas. They're both really good, don't get me wrong. But there's nothing about Shelton Benjamin that screams this guy's a star and Charlie Haas isn't, right? I will concede that Shelton Benjamin can do more flippy shit, which definitely might have played a role in him sticking around as like a mid-card level jobber, right? But the same way that they looked at Charlie Haas and they said, this is not going to work. They should have looked at Shelton Benjamin and said, this is not going to work. They should have looked at Carlito and said, this is not going to work. You should have known this from the very beginning. And the same thing could be said about people like Kevin Owens, Finn Balor, right? Obviously, the people that are below them, JD McDonough, Damian Priest, these people are not going to work. They're never going to be stars. And if you want to keep them around as mid-card nobodies, go ahead. But keep in mind that keeping Kevin Owens as a mid-card nobody and throwing him into every title feud there ever has been, right? Every year, Kevin Owens gets a title shot. But this doesn't raise the profile of Kevin Owens, nor does it raise the profile of wrestling. So it would be better to, for example, fire Kevin Owens' ass and maybe bring up Trick Williams and see how he does against Cookie Rhodes, right? And if you don't think Trick Williams is going to make it, then you have Cookie Rhodes beat him, and then you try it with somebody else. Maybe like Bronco Nima, I don't know. Who gives a fuck? You understand what I'm saying, though, right? You have to keep experimenting to see who the fans connect to. If the fans have not connected sufficiently to Kevin Owens, meaning that nobody actually cares, yeah, when he wins a title, they'll say you deserve it. But they say that to anybody. Like they say it to Julia. Julia wins the title. Nobody knew who the fuck she was 1 week before. And now everyone's like, you deserve it. You don't even know who she is. You've never seen a Julia match before, right? Everyone pretended that they knew who she was. Oh, Zarya, she's killing it in the Australian Indies. I don't give a fuck. Who gives a fuck? You've never watched the Australian Indies. You don't know who this is. But sure, let's pretend you do, so she can waste 10 years of money. Meanwhile, other people get left behind. Like, meanwhile, Jade Cargill has to wait 3 years for a push. Why? Why not introduce Jade Cargill? And here's how Jade Cargill should have been booked. You look down the roster, and you find the female equivalents of your Shelton Benjamins. You find the female equivalents of your Nathan Frazier's. And you say, she's now going to squash all these broads, right? So you start out, Jade Cargill squashes like Piper Niven immediately, right? Jade Cargill squashes Nia Jax. It's never going to happen. She squashes Alexa Bliss. It's never going to happen, right? She's never going to be a massive star. Then she pins Bianca Belair in 2 minutes, and you make her champion from that point. And in my opinion, she should still be champion. She should have gotten like a Roman Reigns type title run, so that when someone beats her, it's a big deal. But instead, you want to throw in a Tiffany Stratton title run. She's never going to be a massive star. Tiffany Stratton is never going to be mainstream. Jade Cargill, in my opinion, had that opportunity. Had that potential. Not anymore. She's in her 30s now, right? How long is she going to keep going? So there you have it. That being said, I blame wrestling in general, but I also blame good old WWE and good old Triple H, of course, but also just generally speaking and more broadly, the Ruthless Aggression era. It ruined everything. So, fuck yourselves, cucks.